Fate has a way of finding those who try hardest to hide. It does not wait for permission. It does not arrive in gentleness. It comes when it pleases, swift and unrelenting, leaving behind the kind of scars that cannot be seen. On this night, fate came to Eliza Warren. It came not in the form of rumor or warning, but in the pounding of a desperate knock. Eliza had lived in quiet, keeping her secret close, never daring to expose what she carried. Since childhood, she had borne a gift, or perhaps a curse, that no one around her could ever understand. With her hands, she could knit together the broken pieces of flesh. With her touch, she could draw life back into those standing at death's edge. Yet such power came with a price. Each time she healed, it drained her. Each time she saved another, she lost a part of herself. Her body weakened, her breath grew shallow, her strength slipped away. It was as though she traded her own life in fragments for the chance to preserve another. And though she never wished for it, never asked to be burdened so, she could never turn her back on suffering. And so, when the knock came heavy and staggering, her heart tightened. It was not the sound of a healthy man, but the sound of one clinging to the last threads of survival. The rhythm was uneven, filled with desperation, as if the hand that struck the wood was guided only by instinct, not strength. When she opened her door, she found a man at the very edge of collapse. His body sagged under the weight of agony. His shirt was stained dark, his face pale with the loss of blood. He staggered forward, and though her body screamed at the burden, she caught him before he could fall. The scent of iron clung to him, heavy, relentless. She looked down and saw the wound near his ribs, a place where blood flowed too freely, a place where death waited patiently. This was no shallow scrape. This was no wound that herbs or bandages could mend. It was the kind of injury that claimed lives on battlefields, the kind of injury that had already dragged many men into the earth. Her hands trembled, but her decision was already made. It had always been this way. The moment she saw pain, she could not look away. The moment she felt another soul slipping, she was bound to act. She knelt over him, pressing her palms to his wound. Her gift stirred. It did not come like fire, nor light, nor anything that the eye could see. It came as a force within her bones, a current of life drawn from her very core. She felt the tearing of flesh, the sting of the bullet buried deep. The pain became her own. She felt the burn in her lungs, the weakness spreading through her veins. And all the while, she poured her strength into him. Time unraveled. Minutes stretched into eternity. Her arms grew heavy, her vision blurred at the edges. Her breath came ragged as though she herself were the one dying. But slowly, steadily, his flesh began to close. The bleeding slowed. The rhythm of his chest grew stronger. His face, once ghostly pale, regained a flicker of color. She nearly collapsed under the toll. Her head swam, her body weak. She had given too much, but not more than she could bear. When at last she drew her hands away, the wound was sealed. The man who had arrived at death's edge now breathed with steady rhythm, no longer a prisoner to the darkness pressing in. And then, for the first time, she looked upon him fully. His face was strong, cut with lines that spoke of hardship. His eyes, though dulled by pain, carried a spark of something fierce. There was gratitude there, unspoken, but undeniable. Yet there was also something else, something far more dangerous. It was in that moment, that silent pause, that something unshakable passed between them, not merely the bond between healer and the healed, not simply the connection of one soul saving another. It was deeper, unbidden, impossible to deny. It was recognition. Her breath faltered when she realized who he was. She had seen that face before, not in flesh and blood, but sketched in ink upon posters nailed to tavern walls. The outlaw whose name spread like wildfire across towns and camps, the man hunted by sheriffs, feared by settlers, whispered about by those who claimed to know his deeds. Caleb Kane. He was a man of shadow, pursued across the territories, branded dangerous by every tongue that spoke his name. To heal him was to tie herself to his crimes. To save him was to risk her own life. Yet she had done it without hesitation. And though her body trembled, though her strength was nearly gone, she felt something stir deep within her that was not fear. It was something more powerful, something she did not dare name. For fate had come to her door, wearing the face of a hunted man, and in saving him, she had set into motion a story neither of them could escape, a story of blood, of sacrifice, of forbidden fire, a story that would leave its mark upon them both, forever. The act of healing was never without cost. For Eliza Warren, it was not a miracle freely given. It was an exchange, a trade between her body and the wound she sought to close. Each time she laid her hands upon torn flesh, each time she pulled life back from the edge of death, she surrendered a part of herself. And now, with the stranger lying beneath her touch, she felt that price being torn from her once again. The wound was deep, carved close to the heart. Her palms pressed firmly over it, and the energy within her stirred. It surged like a tide rising from within, pulling away from her strength, emptying her reserves, draining her until her arms trembled. The pain of the injury transferred through her flesh, and she bore it without sound. The fire of the bullet's path coursed through her veins. The sharp edge of broken tissue screamed in her bones. The agony that should have belonged to him alone now settled into her body. But with every heartbeat she gave away, his became stronger. His breath steadied. His chest rose more evenly. The blood that had poured like an open river slowed to a trickle, then ceased altogether. The wound knit itself under her palms, closing piece by piece, thread by thread of flesh. Her face grew pale. Her breath grew ragged. Her body swayed with exhaustion. Each second felt like a mountain pressing down upon her shoulders, but she did not falter. Her gift demanded her endurance, and she gave it. Minutes passed as though they stretched into hours. The weight of the world pressed against her spine. She bent under it, yet she did not stop. For the man beneath her had been chosen by fate to arrive at her door, and whether he deserved her gift or not, she could not deny him life. When at last the wound was sealed, Eliza fell back with trembling arms. The sweat on her skin chilled her bones. Her body felt empty, as though something vital had been poured out and left her hollow. She gasped for breath, her chest rising and falling like she had crossed a long distance without rest. And there he lay, the stranger who had knocked at her door. His chest moved with steady rhythm now, no longer uneven, no longer fading. His life had been pulled back from the edge, tethered once more to the earth by her sacrifice. She stared at him, her vision blurred by fatigue. His features were sharper now, not washed pale by pain. The strength in his jaw spoke of hardship. The lines around his eyes carried stories she could not yet know. The shadow of something dark clung to him, yet there was also a strange light, a quiet resilience that stirred unease within her. It was in that silence, in the aftermath of her labor, that she felt the weight of recognition, the shape of his face, the set of his features, the image she had seen before on inked posters tacked to saloon walls and town gates. Caleb Kane. The name alone carried weight, spoken in hushed tones, carried from mouth to mouth with both fear and fascination. An outlaw hunted across territories. A man pursued for blood spilled and gold taken. A figure wrapped in legend, painted as both villain and spectre. Some called him ruthless, others swore he was a ghost who could not be caught. And now he lay before her, alive because of her hands. Eliza felt her heart tremble within her chest. She knew the danger. To shelter such a man was to invite ruin. To heal him was to bind herself to his fate. If the law discovered what she had done, there would be no mercy for her. Her life, her safety, all she had built would be cast aside in an instant. But even as fear whispered in her mind, something else rose stronger. She had felt his suffering. She had carried his pain within her body, and in that exchange, a bond had been forged. one that went beyond choice, beyond reason. She leaned back, her body weak, her breath shallow. Her vision swirled, but she forced herself to remain upright. The outlaw lived, she lived, and between them now stretched a thread woven by blood, by sacrifice, and by fate. Eliza closed her eyes, allowing her weary body to sink into stillness. Yet within her heart she knew this was no ordinary act of healing. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous. For she had not only saved a man, she had saved a legend. And legends did not pass quietly through the lives they touched. They left behind scars that endured long after the flesh was whole. And though she had not spoken it, though she dared not give it voice, Eliza knew the truth. She would never be free of Caleb Kane. Not now, not ever. The truth often arrives quietly, yet it carries the weight of thunder once it settles. For Eliza Warren, the truth revealed itself as her weary eyes lingered on the man she had just pulled back from the jaws of death. His features were no longer blurred by blood loss, no longer dulled by the haze of suffering. The man lying before her now bore the sharpness of a face she knew, not through meeting, but through stories carried across the frontier. She had seen his likeness drawn in rough ink, nailed to saloon walls, pressed into the hands of sheriffs, whispered of by travelers and drifters alike. A face that belonged not to a mere man, but to a name that stretched like shadow across the land. Caleb Kane. A name spoken with both dread and fascination. Some called him a murderer without conscience. Others called him a thief who left no gold behind for the poor or desperate. But there were those who spoke of him differently, as a man who had been wronged, driven by vengeance, a figure carved out of fire and grief. No matter the story told, one thing remained certain. His was a life hunted. His was a name pursued by lawmen across the territories. And now Eliza had healed him. Her body trembled from the toll. Her hands felt heavy as though weighed down by chains. Yet the heaviest weight of all was the knowledge pressing against her heart. She had bound herself to a man who carried death in his shadow. By her touch he lived, by her choice he would rise again, and the world would not forgive her for it. Eliza had always walked carefully through life, hiding the truth of her gift. She had kept her secret locked away from prying eyes, fearful of what others would say, of how they might turn on her for what they could not understand. Already she was seen as strange, distant, a woman who dwelled too long in solitude. If the law learned she had saved Caleb Kane, they would brand her as traitor, accomplice, criminal. Her gift would not shield her. It would condemn her. Yet as she stared down at him, pale but breathing steady, she could not regret what she had done. Compassion was not something she could silence. It was her nature, as sure as blood running through her veins. Even knowing who he was, even knowing the danger he carried, she could not have let him die at her door. Still, recognition carved its mark into her soul. This was no ordinary man. This was no nameless drifter whose passing would be forgotten. This was the figure of legend, the outlaw who could not be caught, the man whose name turned lawmen's jaws tight and whispered fear through every campfire tale. Eliza's heart beat unevenly, not with fear alone, but with something she could not name. The bond created through healing was unlike any other. She had carried his pain within herself, and now their lives were entwined by the very act of survival. It unsettled her. It drew her in. It whispered of something forbidden, something beyond sense. For though her body ached with weakness, though her mind warned her of the peril, her spirit felt a pull she could not deny. She knew what lay ahead. The law was relentless. They would search every canyon, every valley, every settlement, and if Caleb Kane continued to walk this earth, danger would follow close behind. Her hands rested weakly at her sides, yet in her chest, her heart knew the truth. She had crossed a line that could not be erased. She had given life back to a man the world wanted buried. She had saved the outlaw whose name had become a legend. And though the night was still, though silence pressed in, the air carried weight. For deep inside, Eliza understood. This moment was not the end of her choice. It was only the beginning. For recognition was not only of his face, or his name, or his past. It was recognition of something far more dangerous. Recognition that her life was no longer her own. Recognition that destiny had entered her home, and it wore the face of Caleb Kane. The act of healing always left its shadow. Eliza Warren had known it since the very first time her gift had awakened within her. For every life she mended, for every wound she closed, the strength of her own body was pulled away. It was not a power that came freely. It demanded payment. It demanded sacrifice. Now, in the hours after saving Caleb Kane, she felt that cost heavy upon her bones. Her limbs were weak. Her chest ached with every breath. A hollow fatigue pressed against her, as though something had been carved out of her very being and left behind as emptiness. Her body trembled with the effort of rising. Her vision swam when she moved too quickly. This was the price she bore, and she had come to know it well. Every scar she erased from another, every pain she drew out and carried within herself, chipped away at her. Sometimes it took only hours to recover, other times days. But no matter how long it lasted, she always knew that the strength she lost could never truly be restored. She was giving pieces of her life away, one healing at a time. Most saw wounds as marks of suffering. To Eliza, they were weights that shifted from one soul to another. A man might leave her table healed, his skin unbroken, his breath steady once more. Yet the ache of that wound lingered in her bones, a reminder that she had carried his pain so he would not. And tonight, the weight was greater than most. Caleb Kane had not come with a simple wound. His injury had been deep, the kind that claimed lives swiftly. To pull him back from death's grip had required more than she could easily give. She had poured herself into him until she thought her body would collapse entirely. And though he now breathed easily, though his life had been restored, her own strength hung by a fragile thread. As she rested, her thoughts turned heavy. She knew nothing of this man beyond his name, his reputation, the whispers of lawmen who hunted him. He was an outlaw, condemned by many, pursued without mercy. To some, he was beyond saving, and yet she had saved him. She had spent her strength, her very essence, to pull him back. A voice inside her questioned the wisdom of what she had done. Every healer's act carried risk, but this risk was greater than most. In healing him, she had not only sacrificed her strength, she had bound herself to him in a way that could not be undone. His survival now bore her mark. His life continued because hers had been diminished. And what did that mean for her? What did it mean to pour her power into a man the world had already condemned? The toll of her gift was not only measured in her body, but in her conscience. For the first time, she wondered if compassion had led her astray. Was the cost she paid worth the danger that would surely follow? Or had she simply tied herself to a fate darker than she could yet imagine? Her body trembled as she sat in stillness. Her breath came slow, labored. She felt the lingering sting of the wound she had closed, echoing faintly within her flesh as though it had become her own scar. This was her curse and her burden. To save another was to wound herself. To give life was to shorten her own. Yet even in the weight of exhaustion, even in the shadows of doubt, she knew she could not have chosen otherwise. The man had come to her door at the edge of death. She could not have turned him away. She had given her strength because it was her nature. She had borne the toll because it was her calling. Still, as she lay weak and trembling, one truth became clear. The healing of Caleb Kane would not be like the others she had performed in her life. It was not an act that would fade into memory. It was not a wound that could be forgotten. It was a turning point, a choice that carved its place deep within her path. For in giving her strength to him, she had done more than heal flesh. She had invited the weight of his life into her own. She had taken his suffering, and in return she would carry the mark of it forever. The toll of her gift was heavy tonight, And though her body ached, though her spirit trembled, she could not shake the sense that this toll was only the beginning. Danger does not always arrive with the roar of gunfire. Sometimes it comes in whispers, carried on the breath of strangers, passed through towns like a sickness, unseen but heavy enough to change the course of lives. Eliza Warren heard those whispers in the days that followed. Word of Caleb Kane was never far behind. His name travelled ahead of him, spoken by wary tongues, painted across wanted posters nailed to doors and posts in every settlement across the frontier. The law hunted him with relentless determination, and the stories grew with each telling. Some swore he had gunned down men in cold blood. Others said he had robbed gold shipments meant for soldiers. A few even claimed he had betrayed his own kind, turning on those who once rode with him. The truth was clouded, lost somewhere between rumor and fear. Yet the law did not care for truth. The law wanted his capture. The law wanted his end. And Eliza knew now that the law was closer than ever. She had seen men ride past, carrying the look of hunters. She had heard the sharp voices inquiring after him, pressing for answers in the towns. His name fell from their lips with disdain, but their eyes carried something more. A hunger, a need to claim the reward tied to his head. Every whisper pressed against her conscience, reminding her of the choice she had made. She had saved him. She had placed her hands upon the most hunted man in the territory and poured her strength into his survival. It was an act that tied her fate to his. And now, as the law drew nearer, the danger of that act grew heavier. She felt the weight of secrecy pressing down on her shoulders. For her gift had always been hidden, concealed from the world to protect her from its fear and judgment. And now she was forced to guard not only her secret, but his. If anyone discovered that Caleb Kane had crossed her threshold, if anyone uncovered that she had been the one to heal him, there would be no mercy. The law would not ask for explanations. They would brand her traitor. They would call her accomplice. And all she had once been would vanish in an instant. The whispers carried urgency. She could feel the net drawing tighter. Every passing rider, every stranger's gaze, every murmur in town halls and along dusty roads reminded her that time was slipping away. Caleb could not remain hidden forever, and neither could she. Yet even as the danger sharpened, Eliza could not deny the truth in her heart. The bond had already formed. It had been forged the moment she carried his pain into herself. He was not just an outlaw to her. He was not simply a name inked on posters. He was the man whose life was tied to hers, bound by blood and sacrifice. The law might see him as a criminal. The whispers might paint him as a villain. But to Eliza, he was more than either. He was the man she had chosen to save, and in that choice, she had already defied the law. The whispers of the law grew louder, filling the days and haunting the nights. They carried the promise of pursuit, the certainty of confrontation. And though her body still ached from the toll of healing, though her spirit trembled with the weight of secrecy, she knew one thing with absolute clarity: the storm was coming, and she was already standing at its center. Choices are the crossroads of destiny. They appear quietly, without fanfare. They demand no ceremony, yet once taken, they cannot be undone. Eliza Warren stood at such a crossroad, though she had known for days it was drawing near. The whispers of the law had grown sharper, heavier, impossible to ignore. Strangers asked more questions. Riders lingered longer on the road. The weight of suspicion pressed closer. The circle was tightening, and with every passing hour, Caleb Kane's name burned hotter in the mouths of those who hunted him. Eliza could have walked away. That was the truth she carried, the truth that pressed against her conscience in the stillness of night. She could have chosen silence. She could have turned him over. She could have unburdened herself of the danger and allowed the law to claim him. It would have been the safer path, the easier path. But safety was no longer hers to claim. The moment she had placed her hands upon his wound, the moment she had poured her strength into his survival, her life had changed. His fate was now bound to hers, and no amount of silence or denial could sever that bond. She had chosen already, though she had not spoken the words aloud. Still, the weight of it pressed against her. She knew what it meant to shield him. She knew the danger it carried. The Lord did not forgive betrayal, and neither did those who chased him. If she stood beside him, she would be branded as he was. If she sheltered him, she would become hunted herself. The choice was heavy. It was not simply about right or wrong. It was about heart and spirit. For Eliza felt something stirring within her that she had long denied herself, the warmth of connection, the spark of belonging. Caleb Cain was a man marked by danger, shadowed by sins real or imagined. Yet in the moments they had shared, when his life had rested in her hands, she had seen beyond the name and the reputation. She had seen the man, broken, scarred, yet alive. Her gift had always demanded sacrifice. Every healing drained her, every act of compassion left her weaker. Yet for the first time, the sacrifice felt different. It was not just her strength she had given, it was her heart. So the choice became clear. Even if the world would call it folly, she would not betray him. She would not surrender him to the hunters. Whatever his past, whatever the law declared him to be, she had chosen to stand with him. It was not a choice made in logic. It was not a choice born of reason. It was a choice of the soul, and once the soul has spoken, no argument can silence it. Eliza accepted the danger. She accepted the judgment that would fall upon her. She accepted the cost that would surely follow. For love is not built in safety. It is born in fire, and it was in that fire she had found her truth. The decision was made. And as the night closed around her, as the whispers of the law echoed in the distance, she felt a calm resolve settle into her spirit. Whatever storm lay ahead, whatever price she would pay, she would face it not as a woman of fear, but as a woman who had chosen. And once a choice is made, destiny moves to meet it.
Love is never louder than when it is forbidden. It speaks in whispers, it hides in silence, and it thrives in the narrow spaces where danger cannot reach. For Eliza and Caleb, those spaces became their sanctuary. Small fragments of time carved out against the relentless weight of pursuit. Fleeting, fragile, yet powerful enough to change everything. In those stolen moments, they shed the burden of who they were in the eyes of the world. He was no longer the outlaw with a price on his head. She was no longer the healer carrying her secret gift. Together, they became simply two souls, drawn together by a bond neither had sought, but neither could deny. Eliza felt it first, in the quiet, the way her heart slowed when he was near, even as fear raged beyond them. The way her spirit lightened, despite the exhaustion that lingered from her healing. She had spent her life carrying the pain of others, emptying herself to give life where there was none. Yet with Caleb, she did not feel hollow. She felt whole. And for Caleb, every stolen moment was a reprieve. For years, he had lived hunted. Each dawn, another beginning of flight. Each dusk, another reminder that peace was beyond his reach. But in Eliza's presence, the chase seemed distant. The lawmen, the whispers, the dangers waiting beyond every shadow, all of it, faded when her gaze fell upon him. For the first time in years, he was not defined by his past. He was not merely a man on the run. He was alive, and he was seen. Those moments were fragile, yet they carried more weight than entire years of solitude. A glance that lingered longer than it should. A breath held in shared stillness. The smallest touch of her hand against his arm, carrying more fire than 1,000 spoken promises. Love is not measured by time, but by depth, and their depth was carved in urgency, in knowing that each moment could be their last. The danger did not fade. It hung around them always, sharper than a blade. They knew the law was near. They knew discovery was inevitable. Yet that knowledge only deepened their bond. For what is more precious than love found in the jaws of peril? What is more powerful than passion that blooms when everything conspires against it? Eliza and Caleb lived in fragments. A heartbeat here, a breath there. Their love was not displayed for the world. It was hidden, tucked into the folds of secrecy. But in those hidden spaces it grew stronger, fiercer, and undeniable. And though Eliza carried the weight of her gift, though her body still bore the echoes of pain she had drawn from him, she did not regret her choice. For every toll, every ache, every sacrifice seemed smaller when measured against what she had found. Stolen moments became their currency, and with each one, their bond tightened, their souls entwined. They knew the storm was still gathering. They knew shadows still hunted them. But they also knew this truth: what they had found together was worth every risk. For some loves are fragile, meant to fade when tested by fire, but others are forged within it. And theirs was a love that burned brighter because of the darkness surrounding it. These stolen moments were all they had. Yet within them lay everything.
Love that survives in silence is fragile, but love that survives in fire becomes unbreakable. For Eliza and Caleb, the fire was constant, the pursuit of the law, the toll of her gift, the weight of secrecy pressing on them both. Yet through that crucible, something deeper was forged, something neither of them could have foreseen when fate first tied their lives together. It began with trust, a quiet, unspoken trust that grew stronger with each passing day. Caleb had lived years watching his back, trusting no one, for betrayal had carved scars upon his past. Yet in Eliza's presence, that armor began to fall. He no longer wore the mask of the outlaw when he was with her. He no longer hid behind silence or suspicion. He allowed himself to be seen entirely, truthfully, without disguise. And for Eliza, whose life had been one of distance, of carrying the burdens of others while holding herself apart, the bond struck deeper still. She had spent years giving her strength away, yet receiving nothing in return. Her gift was a blessing, but it had left her isolated, untouchable, feared by those who did not understand her. Yet Caleb looked upon her differently. He did not see her as strange or dangerous or cursed. He saw her as she was, a woman who gave everything and yet deserved more. Their bond deepened, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet sharing of pain, for both carried scars, visible and unseen. His, carved from years of running and fighting, of choices that had shaped his reputation. Hers, etched within her very soul, carved by the weight of every life she had saved, at the cost of her own strength. And in each other they found not judgment, but understanding. That understanding became the foundation of something unshakable. In a world that hunted him, Caleb found in Eliza the one place he could rest. In a life that drained her, Eliza found in Caleb the one person who gave back, not with healing, but with presence, with acceptance, with the kind of devotion that required no words. The depth of their bond was tested in silence. in the way he steadied her when her body weakened from the toll of her gift, in the way she refused to let him fall back into despair when the shadows of his past weighed upon him. Each carried the other in ways unseen by the world but felt deeply in their hearts. It was not the love of fleeting attraction. It was not the shallow bond born of desire alone. It was something more enduring, something born of shared vulnerability, of two broken souls who, in finding each other, discovered they were not broken at all. They were whole, and though the danger pressed closer, though every whisper of the law promised ruin, neither could turn away. Their bond was no longer a fragile thread. It had become a chain, unbreakable, forged in fire and bound by choice. The world could hunt them, the law could condemn them, but the bond they shared had already transcended such forces. For love does not ask for safety. Love does not demand ease. True love demands only this: devotion, even in the face of loss. And that devotion now defined them both. The depth of their bond was not measured in time, but in the weight of sacrifice, and each of them, in their hearts, knew one truth. Whatever the storm ahead, whatever the price demanded, they would face it not as two, but as one. For once, souls entwined so deeply there is no separation, there is no return, there is only the unshakable bond of love. Every love story reaches a moment of reckoning, a point where passion collides with danger, a point where choices made in silence must be tested in fire. For Eliza and Caleb, that moment came sooner than either wished. The net of the law was tightening. Whispers had grown into certainty, and the hunters who pursued him now moved with relentless precision. Eliza had long known that this day would come. From the instant she laid her hands upon his broken body, from the moment she chose to heal rather than abandon him, she had tied her fate to his. But knowing a storm will come does not make its arrival easier. And when the shadows of danger finally pressed close, she felt its weight heavy upon her spirit. Caleb, too, could no longer pretend that time was theirs to waste. For years he had lived on the edge of pursuit, carrying the knowledge that safety was an illusion. Yet something within him had changed since Eliza. He had found not just shelter, but meaning. He had tasted not only survival, but belonging. And it was that belonging that made the danger sharper, the fear heavier. For he now had more to lose. The breaking point arrived not with words, but with pressure that could no longer be ignored. The lawman's circle had closed. The whispers in nearby towns spoke of eyes upon him, of plans made to strike. Eliza could feel it in the stillness of the nights. Caleb could sense it in his bones. The inevitable was upon them. And so the choice stood before them both, to run or to stand, to part or to face the storm together. For Eliza, the thought of leaving him tore at her soul. Her gift had always demanded sacrifice. She had paid with her strength, her body, her spirit. But what was the worth of such sacrifice if not for love? What was the meaning of her gift if she chose safety over devotion? To let him go now would be to betray not only him, but herself. For Caleb, the choice was even heavier. He had never asked her to carry his burden. He had never wanted her to pay his price. He knew the danger of standing beside him. He knew the law would brand her guilty as easily as they branded him. And yet, even in his fear for her safety, he could not deny what had been forged between them. To leave her would be to cut away the only light he had found in years of darkness. The breaking point was not a single moment, but a collision of truths. Two souls bound by love, torn between freedom and devotion, each knowing that the storm ahead might destroy them, each knowing that to walk away might destroy them more. There are times in life when logic falters, when reason bends beneath the weight of passion. This was such a time. Eliza and Caleb stood upon the edge of choice, and though the law bore down upon them, though the shadows pressed close, they chose not to surrender what they had found. The breaking point became their bond's test, and in that test they discovered something unshakable. Their love was not a fragile flame to be blown away by fear. It was a fire that refused to be extinguished. The law might take their freedom, the storm might demand their lives, but nothing could take from them what they had already become. One soul, one bond, one love, unbroken even at the breaking point. Every storm reaches its heart. Every chase finds its end, and for Eliza and Caleb, that end came not with whispers, but with the sharp certainty of confrontation. The law had drawn close, closer than ever before. The circle that once lingered at a distance now closed upon them with unyielding force. Caleb had always known this day would come. He had outrun them for years, slipping through shadows, surviving on instinct. But the law is patient, the law is relentless, and once its jaws tighten, escape becomes little more than a dream. He had lived on borrowed time, and now the debt had come due. Eliza felt it before the moment arrived. Her spirit trembled with the weight of inevitability. Every sacrifice she had made, every choice that had bound her to him, led her here. The confrontation was not simply his to face, it was hers as well. For her gift had tied her life to his. Her heart had chosen him when reason told her to walk away, and now she would pay the price of that choice. The clash came swiftly, no warning, no time for retreat. The hunters descended, carrying the authority of the law, armed with conviction and driven by reward. They saw Caleb not as a man, but as quarry. They saw Eliza not as a healer, but as his accomplice. To them there was no question, no mercy, no understanding, only capture, only justice as they defined it. Caleb met the moment with defiance. His spirit had long been sharpened by survival, his will tempered by years of pursuit. Yet this time, something was different. He was not fighting only for himself. He was fighting for her, for the bond they had built, for the fragile but unshakable love that had given him something worth more than freedom. Eliza, though no weapon rested in her hands, played her part with equal resolve. Her strength was not in steel or fire, but in sacrifice. She had given her gift to him once before, and in this confrontation she carried its weight again. Every breath she took reminded her of the price she had already paid to keep him alive, and as danger closed upon them, she knew she would pay it again if she must. The confrontation was not just steel against steel, or will against will. It was love against fate, passion against inevitability. Two souls bound together, standing before a world that sought to tear them apart. And though the law pressed hard, though the odds stood against them, there was no surrender in their hearts. The moment burned itself into memory. Caleb, fierce in his defiance, Eliza, unwavering in her devotion. Together they became something the law could not understand, not merely fugitive and healer, not merely hunted and protector, but two lives fused into one, unwilling to be separated even at the edge of ruin. The confrontation carried its price, as all storms do. Blood was shed, strength was spent, choices were carved into stone. And when the dust of conflict settled, nothing would be the same. For the law had seen them, the hunters had marked them, and the world itself would remember the day an outlaw and a healer stood together, unbroken, in the heart of the storm. The confrontation was not the end. It was the beginning of sacrifice yet to come. The test of love had only sharpened, and the price of passion would only grow heavier. Every great love is tested not by words, but by what one is willing to surrender. For Eliza and Caleb, the test arrived with merciless clarity. The confrontation had left them bruised, battered, and exposed. The law had not been defeated. It had only been delayed, and now, in the aftermath, both knew what the other feared to speak. Survival would demand sacrifice. Eliza had carried sacrifice all her life. Each time she used her gift, she gave pieces of herself away. Each healing drained her, each act of compassion shortened her path. It was a burden she had learned to accept, but never had that burden weighed as heavily as it did now. For the man whose life she had bound to hers stood upon the edge of ruin once more. Caleb bore his wounds with grim determination. He had survived the clash, but survival alone was not victory. The hunters would return. The law would come again, stronger and more relentless. He understood that their time was measured in moments, and that his choices would decide her fate as much as his own. And so the question lay before them both. Who would pay the price this time? Eliza's heart carried the answer long before her mind accepted it. She had chosen him once before. She had given her strength to him when he lay at death's door. And now, as his life once again hung in the balance, she knew she would do it again. For love, once true, asks for everything. And she was prepared to give everything. But Caleb, hardened by years of running, saw what her choice would mean. He knew the toll of her gift, knew how it drained her, how it carved away at her body until nothing was left but weakness and pain. He could not ask her to give more. He could not bear the thought of watching her diminish herself to save him. For the first time in years, he had something worth protecting, and he would not let that be taken from him. The sacrifice stood between them like a shadow, her willingness to give, his refusal to let her, both bound by love, both willing to fall if it meant the other could rise. It was a cruel test, one written by fate itself. And yet, as the storm of danger gathered once more, the decision could not be delayed. The law would not wait. Death would not hesitate. The moment of sacrifice had come. Eliza's body trembled with exhaustion, her spirit frayed by the toll of her gift, but in her eyes burned an unshakable resolve. She had chosen him, and no threat, no fear, no law could strip that choice away. If her life was the cost, she would pay it gladly, for to save him was not merely duty, it was love. Caleb's soul, scarred by years of loss, rebelled against it. He had sworn never again to let another suffer for him. Yet here stood the one soul who had broken through his armor, willing to bear the burden he could not. And so he faced the truth that all who love must face, the truth that to protect another sometimes means surrendering yourself. The sacrifice was made not in words, but in action. A choice carved into the marrow of their beings, a choice that would echo beyond the moment itself. Whether it was her strength poured once more into him, or his defiance shielding her from the law's reach, the cost was inevitable. Something would be lost, something precious. And as the night swallowed their fate, the truth was undeniable. Love had demanded its price, and they had paid it. The sacrifice was not the end of their story, but it was the mark upon it, a mark that would never fade, a mark that would define everything that followed. For true love always asks for more than we are ready to give, and yet we give it anyway. Trust is the rarest treasure, hard-won, fragile and easily broken. For Eliza and Caleb, trust had been the foundation of everything. It had been built in silence, forged in sacrifice, and carried through fire. Yet even the strongest trust can falter when the world presses too hard, and in the shadows of their love, betrayal found its place. It did not arrive with shouts or gunfire. It crept in quietly, like a cold hand upon the heart. The law had grown ruthless in their pursuit, their circle closing tighter with each passing hour. Neighbors whispered, strangers questioned, and though Eliza and Caleb clung to one another, the world around them grew hostile. Pressure sharpened every choice and fear twisted every thought. For Caleb, betrayal was a scar that never healed. He had known it before. In men he once called brothers, in allies who had traded loyalty for gold. It was why he trusted so few, why his life had become one of constant flight. And though Eliza had broken through his armor, the weight of that old wound still lingered. In the face of pursuit, in the shadow of danger, suspicion took root. For Eliza, betrayal was not an act she could even imagine. Her life had been one of sacrifice, of giving until nothing was left. Yet love, for all its fire, carries fear as well. And in her heart, a quiet terror grew. The fear that Caleb, hardened by years of running, might one day choose freedom over her. that when the moment came, his instinct to survive would prove stronger than the bond they had forged. The betrayal that followed was not born of malice, but of desperation. It came in the space between trust and fear, where decisions are made not by the heart, but by the weight of survival. A truth hidden, a step taken alone, a promise bent beneath the burden of pursuit, and in that moment, something precious cracked between them. Eliza felt it like a blade through the spirit. The man she had given everything to, the man whose life she had bound to hers, had chosen a path that cut against their bond. Whether it was a secret kept, an alliance made, or a choice to shield her by deception, the result was the same. Trust wavered, the foundation trembled. Caleb felt the sting as well. For betrayal, even when done for love, still carves scars. He had meant to protect her, to shield her from the storm that gathered, to bear the burden alone so that she might be spared. But in sparing her, he had wounded her more deeply than the law ever could. The silence that followed was heavier than any chain, for when trust falters, love itself is tested. And though their bond had been forged in fire, though sacrifice had already been made, betrayal stood between them now like a wall. Yet even in the ache of that wound, one truth remained unshakable. Love, once true, does not vanish in the face of betrayal. It bends, it suffers, it bleeds, but it does not die. Not if the hearts that carry it refuse to let go. Eliza and Caleb, though broken in that moment, were not destroyed, for their story was not one of ease. It was one of fire, of sacrifice, of choices carved in pain. And betrayal, though sharp, was but another test of what they had chosen. The wound would scar, the trust would never be as untouched as before, but scars are not endings, they are reminders. And this betrayal would become yet another mark upon their dangerous love. A reminder that passion and pain walk hand in hand, and that even in breaking their bond endured. For love that survives betrayal becomes something different, something stronger, something unshakable. And though the world pressed harder, though the hunters drew nearer, Eliza and Caleb still stood, marked, changed, scarred, but together. Every choice leaves a shadow, every act of love, every moment of betrayal, every sacrifice carved along the way demands its price. For Eliza and Caleb, the heavy cost had been building from the very first moment fate tied them together. And now, at last, it came due. The world around them had given no mercy. The law bore down with relentless hunger, unwilling to rest until Caleb was either bound in chains or buried in the dust. And Eliza, who had given of herself again and again, found her body faltering beneath the strain. Each time she used her gift, it drained her more deeply than the last. The fire within her dimmed, and though her heart still blazed with love, her strength wavered. The heavy cost was not sudden, it was gradual. A slow unraveling of everything they had built. Each stolen moment together came at the risk of capture. Each act of healing demanded a piece of Eliza's spirit. Each choice to keep fighting pulled Caleb further from any chance of redemption. They were not merely running from the law, they were running from time itself. Caleb knew it well. His life had been one of running, of fighting, of surviving at any cost, but for the first time survival no longer meant his own skin, it meant hers. Every breath she struggled to take, every tremor that racked her body after she poured her gift into him, reminded him that their love was burning them both alive. And Eliza, though frail, carried no regret. She had chosen him, again and again, through fear, through betrayal, through sacrifice, she had chosen him. And though her strength waned, her love only grew fiercer. She did not fear death. She feared only leaving him alone in a world that had shown him nothing but cruelty. The heavy cost hung between them, undeniable. One of them would be claimed, perhaps both, for love that defies the world cannot last forever without payment, and the world was determined to collect. When the law finally closed in, there was no triumph in their eyes, no illusion of escape without loss. Both knew the truth. something precious would be taken. Caleb, hardened as he was, braced himself for the fight, knowing it might be his last. Eliza, frail but resolute, prepared her heart to give the final piece of herself if it meant saving him. The clash that followed was not merely a battle of men, it was a battle of destiny. Every shot fired, every desperate strike, every moment of defiance was paid for in blood and in spirit. Caleb's body bore the wounds, but Eliza's soul bore the weight. She gave everything she had left, pouring her strength into him one final time. And when her gift burned out, when the last spark left her trembling form, the cost was sealed. Caleb lived, but Eliza's body faltered. What had been drained in silence for so long could no longer be replenished. She had poured herself out until nothing remained. The heavy cost had claimed her. And in that moment, Caleb knew what true loss was. Not the betrayal of comrades, not the cruelty of law, not the bitterness of exile, but the loss of the one soul who had given him everything. He had fought the world for her, he had bled for her, and still the world had taken her away. Yet even in death, her sacrifice was not defeat. For love does not vanish when the body fails. Love leaves marks. It shapes destinies. It carves its truth into the hearts of those who dare to embrace it. And Eliza's gift, her sacrifice, became the final and unshakable proof that their bond was real. The heavy cost had been paid in full, and though Caleb stood broken, scarred and hollow, he carried with him the fire she had kindled, a fire that no law, no betrayal, no grave could ever extinguish. For love once true does not die, it lingers, it haunts, it endures. And in the end, that was the greatest cost of all, to live without her, but to carry her forever. And Eliza, though gone, lived on in whispers. Her gift, her compassion, her sacrifice, all became legend. There were those who swore they felt her presence when wounds closed too swiftly, when the sick found strength without reason, when a weary soul felt peace in the silence of the night. Whether truth or wishful yearning, her name became a prayer upon the lips of the desperate. The echoes of their dangerous romance carried far beyond their lives. Lovers in hidden corners spoke their names when promising loyalty. Wanderers on the trail told their story to remind themselves that even in a world of dust and lawlessness, passion could burn brighter than fear, and the lawmen who had once chased them remembered with unease the price of their pursuit, for they too had seen what love could demand and what it could endure. The tale of Eliza and Caleb was not neat. It was not clean. It was jagged, blood-stained, scarred by sacrifice and betrayal. But that was what made it powerful. It was not a dream, not a fable told to soothe children at night. It was truth. Raw. Harsh. Beautiful. And in that truth lay the greatest echo of all, that love, no matter how dangerous, no matter how forbidden, no matter how costly, was worth it. For it transformed even the most broken soul. It gave meaning to sacrifice. It gave weight to choice. It endured beyond death itself. Their romance did not end in their arms. It lived on in memory, in whisper, in echo. For some loves are too powerful to fade. They become eternal. Life is shaped not by chance alone, but by the choices we make when the world presses hardest against us. For Eliza and Caleb, choice had defined everything. She chose compassion when others would have turned away. He chose trust when his past told him to doubt. Together, they chose love, even when it defied the law, even when it demanded sacrifice. And though their story ended in blood, in loss, in whispers carried on the wind, their choices endured. The enduring power of choice lies not in its ease, but in its weight. Eliza had known that her gift would cost her dearly. She had known that every time she healed, she surrendered a piece of herself. Yet she chose to give, again and again, because her heart refused to turn from suffering. Caleb had known that his path was marked with betrayal, with exile, with pursuit. Yet when fate placed her in his life, he chose not to run from her, but toward her. Those choices bound them, those choices carved their legacy, and so the question lingers, was their love doomed from the beginning, or was it made eternal precisely because of the cost it carried? The world will argue both answers. Some will say passion in such a cruel land could never survive. Others will say that passion which endures trial and sacrifice is the only kind that truly matters. But the truth is simpler. Love is always a choice, to stay, to fight, to give, to risk. And Eliza and Caleb chose it fully, in the face of danger, in the grip of fear, even in the moment of betrayal. They never turned away, and because of that, their story endures long after their bodies faded into dust. The enduring power of choice does not belong only to them. It belongs to all who remember them. To the lovers who whisper their names when pledging their devotion, to the wanderers who tell their story by firelight, reminding themselves that love is stronger than fear, to the hearts that wonder if passion is worth the pain and find in Eliza and Caleb their answer. For love is never safe. It demands, it wounds, it costs. Yet it also redeems, it transforms, it makes the broken whole, even if only for a fleeting moment. And those moments, chosen freely, become eternal. The tale of Eliza and Caleb is not a promise of happy endings. It is a reminder that what we choose defines who we are. That even in a dangerous world, even beneath the weight of loss, the act of choosing love is a triumph all its own. And so their legacy is not merely their passion. It is not merely their sacrifice, it is the unshakable truth that choice is power. The power to heal, the power to protect, the power to love when fear demands surrender. That is what endures. The West will forget many names, outlaws, lawmen, wanderers, healers, but the story of a woman who gave until nothing was left and a man who chose her above all else will echo forever. Not because they were flawless, not because they were spared, but because they chose again and again to love in a world that punished such devotion. And so the story closes, not with despair, not with defeat, but with the enduring reminder that love is a choice worth making, even when it costs everything, even when the world stands against it. For love, once chosen, never truly dies. It becomes eternal. And so, the tale of Eliza and Caleb drifts into legend. Their choices echo still, carried on the wind like whispers of love and loss. Yet every legend finds new life when it is remembered. And you, dear traveler, can help keep their story alive. Mark this tale with a gesture of kinship. Give it your mark of approval. Share it with those who wander the same roads of longing and fate. And leave a trace of your own journey by telling us, where in this wide world do you call home? For every voice, every place, every soul adds to the tapestry of these timeless stories. Stay with us for more journeys away.